We'll continue lesson. Volumes of right pyramids and cones. Volume is the amount of space an object occupies. It is measured in cubic unit. Capacity is the amount of material a container holds. It is measured in cubic units or capacity units. The volume of a right prism is defined by the base area times the height. An example of a right prism is a rectangular base, a square base, or frankly, any polygon, just as long as the base continues vertically upwards with a repetitive pattern, that the base and the top of the shape is the same. For the volume of a right pyramid, it's a little bit different story. It is 1/3 times the base area times the height. Let's take a look at an example where we could use these formulas. Calculate the volume of right square pyramid to the nearest cubic inch. Now let's take a look at the formula for finding the volume of a right square pyramid. The formula is, the volume is 1/3 the area of the base times its height. If we take a look at a picture of the pyramid, the height is unknown to us. The first thing we have to do is we have to find the height. Take a look at the red triangle. What we know is the slanted height, which is 6 inches, and we know also the base of the pyramid. What we're interested is in the height. We have to find the height in order to find the volume. So we know the slanted height is 6 inches. We also know that the base is half of 4, which is 2 inches. We're going to use Pythagoras to find the height of this triangle. So c squared is equal to a squared plus b squared. And we already know the longest side, the hypotenuse, which is 6. And we're looking for the height. So 2 squared plus height squared. So 36 is equivalent to 4 plus the height. How do we get the 4? Because it's 2 squared. Height squared. We subtract 4 from both sides to cancel out, to separate the h from everything else. We'll get 32. It's equivalent to height. And we'll take the square root of both sides of the equation because we're looking for the value of height, not height squared. So therefore height is 5.66 inches. Now since we have the height, we can use the height to find the volume. So now volume is again written as 1/3 area of the base times the height. So volume is 1/3 area of the base is 4 times 4 because it is a square. And the height is 5.66. So therefore volume is 30 inches squared. And take a look at the question. It asks for the nearest cubic inch. That's why we rounded off to 30 inches. Because it was originally 30.16. And we round down to 30 because the 0.1 is smaller than 5. Smaller than 0.5. Let's take a look at another example. But before we do, let's take a look at some variations of the volume formula. Another way to look at the volume formula is by just looking at the dimensions and not really caring about the area of the base. So one way to look at volume when it comes to a cube is knowing that volume of a rectangular prism is length times width times height. In other words, it's the same thing as having the area which is length times width, of the base times height. As for the right rectangular pyramid, it's often referred to as the volume as a third length times width times height, but it can also be written as length times width is really area of the base times the height. So whether you use length times width times height or area of the base times height for the rectangular prism, or a third length times width times height, or 1/3 area of the base times the height for right rectangular pyramid, both of these formulas will lead you to the right success in completing these type of questions. Determine the volume of a right rectangular pyramid with base dimensions 5.4 centimeters by 3.2 centimeters and a height of 8.1 centimeters. Answer to the nearest tenth of a cubic centimeter. In this case, since we have all the dimensions, the height, the width, and the length of this figure, we can use the formula I showed you just a second ago to find the answer. So the formula is volume is equivalent to 1/3 length times width times height. So it is 1/3 length of the base pyramid is 5.4, the width is 3.2, and the height is 8.1. And notice that we're dealing in centimeters, so our answer will be in centimeters cubed. And it turns out to be 46.656, which has to be rounded off to the nearest tenth, which is 46.7, and don't forget units, centimeters cubed. This is your answer. There are more shapes than just rectangular prisms or right pyramids. There is the cylinder, and there is also the right cone. Notice that all of these have very similar characteristics than the previous, like the previous three-dimensional objects. And all of them are similarly designed in formulas. It is always the area of the base. In this case, for cylinder, the area of the base is a circle. We have base times the height. As for a right cone, it is very similar to the pyramid. Notice the base is a circle, so again it is 1/3 times the area of the base times the height. Let's take a look at an example where we could use these formulas. Determine the volume of the cone to the nearest cubic inch. Let's recopy the formula for the volume of the cube. It is 1/3 pi r squared times height. So we have the height of 18 inches. We have the diameter of the circle, which is 12. If we divide it by 2 or half it, we get a radius of 6 inches. Now we'll take those values and put it into our volume formula. 1/3 pi r, don't forget the square, times the height, which is 18 inches. This will give you an answer of 678.58, but we have to round it up to the nearest cubic inch. Therefore, the answer is 679 cubic inches, which is inches cubed, is our answer. Let's take a look at the last problem. In this example, we have a cone that has a height of 4 yards and a volume of 205 cubic yards. We need to determine the radius of the base of the cone to the nearest yard. Let's start with the picture and what we know. We know the height, but we don't know the radius, and that's what we're looking for. So let's write the formula. Volume is equivalent to 1/3 pi r squared times the height. Now let's plug in all the information that we know about this question. We know it's 2/5 is equivalent to 1/3 pi. We don't know the radius, which is r squared. We just leave it there, and we know the height, which is. So in this case, we have 1/3 pi times r squared times 4. We could bring the 1/3 pi and 4 together. How do we bring them together? Is by, we know that there's multiplication that exists between these values. So on your calculator, we could do the following. We just multiply them to get a result of 4.19. This means that we get 2/5 on the left-hand side and 4.19 times r squared. Since we have multiplication on the right-hand side, 4.19 times r squared, we divide both sides of the equation by 4.19 to cancel the 4.19. And since we do it on one right side of the equation, we have to also do it on the left side of the equation. So on the right-hand side, we get r squared alone. And on the left-hand side, we get 48.93. That is equal to r squared. The last thing we have to do is we have to square root both sides of the equation to get the value of r. So r is 6.9957. But since the question is asking you to the nearest yard, we have to round off r to 7 yards exactly. There's another way to solve for r. Let's come back to this step. We use the words of cross multiplication to get the solution. Recall that a whole number has always a denominator of 1, such as the 4 and such as the pi. What can we do is we could cross multiply to get the same result. How do we cross multiply? When we cross multiply, we're going to bring the denominator from the other side of the equation to the denominator to the numerator, and the pi and the 4 will bring it down to the denominator. The result is as follows: 205 times 3 divided by 4 pi is equivalent to r squared. Your calculator, when calculating this, has to have the following operations: 205 times 3 divided by 4 pi, and make sure that this is inside the bracket. The reason why this has to occur is because the calculator knows operations. If you didn't have this bracket in your calculator, what it will do multiplication first, then it would divide by 4, and then it would multiply by pi. It's very important that you know that 4 pi has to be calculated, multiplied together first. Then it has to be divided. That's why this bracket has to be in place. This will give us the same result as before for r squared. It's 48.94. And again, we have to take the square root of both sides. And with approximations, we get r is equal to 7 yards again. So whether you cross-multiply or multiply 1/3 times pi times 4 and then divide both sides by the same value, will get you the same result of 7 yards. Now it's up to you which method to choose.